Look at him, he's heading for that small moon.
I think I can get him before he gets there. He's almost in range.
That's no moon.
Maybe you can hum the theme song. Won't hold it against you if you get parts wrong. While the memory's not too strong, there's a piece of you from a time long gone. So while these fuzzy warm feelings remain, question we ask is still the same. Is it a treasure or just plain lame? Is this still good?
Hello and welcome back to Season 2 of Is This Still Good? It's been a little bit for us recording. We missed you. Hope you missed us. And just a reminder, we're taking a slightly different approach this season and looking at things side by side to see how they approach adaptations and reboots, and that almost makes sense. It's been 4 months. Gavin, how you doing?
I'm doing okay.
You want me to redo that, or that's probably the best we're going to get?
Chase your bliss, man.
All right, Gavin, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, I've got this hope that we can, this new hope that we can talk about these hidden fortresses of Kurosawa. Is that what we're...
I mean, I feel better about what I just rambled with if you're doing that. What movies are you talking about? We're doing our Kurosawa series, obviously. So
Yes.
one of those is the Hidden Fortress.
This is the Hidden Fortress,
Okay.
as it compares to the adventures of Luke Starkiller as taken from the Journal of the Wills, Saga 1, The Star Wars.
Oh, who's Luke Starkiller?
Well, that's what we're gonna have to talk about.
Oh, it's a mystery.
I'm gonna leave a little bit of that and introduce our roving samurai person that we're bringing onto the podcast.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take that one.
You wanted to call him Shogun, but you weren't completely sure what that was. Is that what just happened?
That is what happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
The more you guys talk, the more I'm convinced that the name of your show is an actual question about yourselves.
That is a justified burn.
Welcome to Is This Still Good? A show about aging. Seamus, how you doing?
I'm doing good, guys.
Yeah, well, you're a near birthday boy, and we're lucky to have you.
Yeah, great.
We decided to have Seamus on because it's almost his birthday, so this is a real special treat for him. And no other reason. Have you seen Star Wars? Do you have any connection to Star Wars? Are you maybe the biggest Star Wars nerd I know that I'm comfortable talking to?
For those at home, Seamus is holding up Star Wars paraphernalia.
This was not even planned. I happen to just have these old Burger King Return of the Jedi cups and these sunglasses that have lightsabers on the sides. I was literally redecorating my room today.
Hold that up really close to the camera for the listeners.
Yeah, everybody getting a good listen to that?
That's pretty fucking tight, I gotta say.
Let me see if I can run my hand along it next to the mic, see if anyone can hear.
Yeah.
The grooves of Obi-Wan's lightsaber.
Put them in your mouth and chew a little bit for the mukbang.
Now that I produce podcasts, I no longer eat food on other people's podcasts.
I appreciate you holding up commemorative cups to the camera instead of chewing carrots.
Still got to do something confusing, I think it's safe to say I'm probably one of the bigger Star Wars people, as long as we don't talk about Disney.
We can adhere to what we said ahead of time, where just no one talks about The Last Jedi.
There's a truce.
Make the medicine go down.
There's a truce that has been made, and we are only talking about A New Hope.
Okay. We'll talk about other movies.
That's probably a Phantom Menace too.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Hidden Fortress as well. Kurosawa's
we may get to Hidden Fortress. We'll see. They've intertwined all the Star Wars movies so much at this point that it's impossible to just talk about A New Hope in a vacuum.
Oh, absolutely. Again, if we're looking at the Hidden Fortress, the biggest thing that most people talk about when they talk about this movie is that it is basically, by George Lucas's own words, this is the pattern that he based the original story for A New Hope when it was just going to be one movie. And Gavin, I'm glad you read out the original script title because it's wild.
Chef's kiss.
But that's the thing is also, I think when people then go watch this and they assume it's going to be like one for one.
Sure.
Oh my God, he just lifted this. But this isn't like that Korean movie that Tarantino lifted shot for shot for Reservoir Dogs from. Like, it's just influenced.
Yes.
There are moments, But a lot of it's just kind of how the plot's presented and characters that influence later things. And a lot of these things carry on to be in other movies that aren't present in New Hope. But the core of it, and it's whenever I'm explaining it to somebody and saying, hey, this is the movie that kind of influenced Star Wars, it's that the movie begins with a tall guy and a short guy standing in the middle of the desert, arguing about whose fault it is they're stuck in the middle of the desert. And then the movie is told from their perspective. You have the heroic characters, the bigger names of the story, but the whole time it's focused on these two characters. And so in the Hidden Fortress, that's, oh my God, I'm blanking on their names. Tahe and Matashi.
Yeah.
The two peasants.
Yeah.
And then in Star Wars, you have C-3PO and R2-D2.
Spoiler alert, we are going to mispronounce a lot of Japanese names in this episode.
Yes. But yeah, and then C-3PO, R2-D2 being the kind of like POV characters kind of constant through A New Hope. It's very New Hope, and then Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi is still kind of there. It's not so much in the original in the sequel trilogy, and then they had BB-8 in Disney.
Yeah, I think it's much more fair to say that like Kurosawa is an incredible influence on George Lucas and on a lot of modern film and on every Western post 1960.
Spike Lee announced today that he is remaking High and Low with Jeffrey Wright and Denzel Washington, which I'm like,
yeah,
okay,
that makes sense.
I mean,
why not?
Yeah,
he did such a good job with Old Boy, so I trust Spike Lee with remakes.
High and Low is also based on a book where originally it's set in New York, so I'm like, that gives me a little more confidence. High and Low, but Kurosawa's High and Low is like untouchable.
As we'll discover through this series, like Kurosawa is a great way to look at like reboots and adaptations because half of Kurosawa's films are based off of books from Western authors or historical fiction. Or like from Japanese historical texts, or like his last movie Ran is just King Lear.
Ran is King Lear. Throne of Blood is Macbeth. And then Rashomon is actually really cool because it's based on. I can't remember the author's name right now, but it's a collection of short stories that he wrote, and in it there's two different short stories. One is a very short, like 2 pages long, about a guy standing under a Rashomon in a rainstorm and just kind of like observing the history of it. And then there's another one that's the story about these 3 people arguing about what happened at a trial. And that got combined to be the movie Rashomon. Which then became the trope that is very popular in a lot of films and TV shows, which is let's retell that story from 3 or different perspectives or things like that.
Yeah. I would argue something like I wouldn't call The Last Duel a remake of Rashomon, but because of the content and the form, it's about as much as Star Wars is a remake of Hidden Fortress, which Absolutely. I would say it is not. And unfortunately, it was kind of pitched to me that way. So I was like looking through and taking notes, and I just kind of stopped at a certain point because, yeah, it's got R2-D2 and C-3PO, and it's got a rebel princess. But it's more that Kurosawa is such an influence on George Lucas that a question I want to revisit by the end of the podcast is, should Kurosawa get back-end points and a cut of Star Wars profit? Should his estate just get like $1 billion from Disney?
I think he should just get the toy rights.
Seamus, what's your background with Star Wars? You've convinced us that you're a fan. What was your first kind of exposure to
my first exposure
The Adventures of Luke Starkiller?
Yeah, my first exposure to the Luke.
That's taken from the Saga of the Wills.
Yes, that's taken.
Episode 1, The Star Wars.
So I first saw Star Wars when they did the special edition re-releases because I was born a year after Return of the Jedi came out, so I wasn't going to see those in theaters. And mostly it was just I was a huge Harrison Ford fan because of like Indiana Jones. And I just remember we went to the second or third day they were doing it at the Coronet, which was this huge theater in San Francisco that just had one screen, but until IMAX came along, it was like the biggest screen in Northern California, and they would only do one movie at a time, and they were doing the Star Wars special editions, so that would be 1996, 1997. So no, 97, I think.
One of those.
No, it was 20-year anniversary, so it'd be 97. And not to get too personal, it was also the period my parents were getting divorced, so I kind of developed an unnatural, unhealthy coping mechanism tied to it. But
George Lucas is your new daddy.
No, Harrison Ford forever.
Okay.
No, but then I it always just spoke to me. I've always just loved the world building, the characters. It's just, it is a picture perfect way to tell the hero's journey, and it's also just something that like you get a lot from the older you get, and there's just it's rewatchable infinitely. And then once I first experienced it, it was just like, yeah, it's a game over. Like that is everything I was about. Endless toys, Lego, every video game. I was reading the expanded universe. I got made fun of one year in like 7th grade because my choice for book report over the summer was Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina. My teacher made me rewrite the paper.
Oh, wow.
She was like, I'll give you an A, but you cannot read this in class.
Was that like
just
her
looking
trying
out
to
for you?
defend you, or was she just like, look, I get you did the work, but come on, man.
I think she was kind of trying to defend me, like be like,
Wow.
You're gonna get fucking ridiculed, child.
Yeah, I guess we're all just a little bit too old. If we were all a little bit younger, it would have been cool to be a nerd. Just like 5 years. Life wouldn't have been any easier in any
For
other
sure.
way being
No,
5
I hear
years
what you're
younger,
saying, yeah.
but
Yeah.
but
Well, it
at
was also
least
that-
like being a nerd would have been a lot more accepted.
It was also just, there was this weird ebb and flow of Star Wars fandom, which is basically like
Yeah.
Special Edition came out when I was 8, so we're watching those, and everybody my age is kind of just, especially in San Francisco proper, just because everybody was going to the Coronet to see these, and it was this big spectacle.
Yeah.
Like George Lucas was always there opening night, and like all these things. It was a big thing, and so everybody I knew would see it, and this was everybody discovering it for the first time. And we'd be playing Star Wars in the backyard and things like that. Everybody was buying the action figures, and most people developed other interests and kept on being interested in other shit for the for whatever. I, on the other hand, was still just like, I fucking love Star Wars. And then people kind of like didn't care anymore, and then the prequels came out. And now when the prequels came out, people were really hyped about them for a little while.
Yeah.
And then they quickly started to realize that they were bad. Which is like unfortunate. And I still was like, but like the pod race?
I mean,
I don't know.
Yeah. It's got
I-
a few incredible sequences.
Yeah, I will say, I think
spawned a
history-
couple good video games.
Yeah,
Yeah, the pod.
Well, it's also done. It's the lore building that it did for Star Wars is like you have everything that you got from the original trilogy. The prequels, they gave them so much stuff to build off of that you were able to continue those stories and things like the Clone Wars. You were able to go back further and do stuff like Knights of the Old Republic because now you had a little bit more structure of what like the Jedi system was like and things like that. And a lot of that's owed to also expanded universe authors like Timothy Zahn and stuff like that who were really just coming up with all these like lore and things like that. But I don't know. I'm not going to say too much about Disney, but there's only one that's getting TV shows made about it. And they're running out of post Return of the Jedi stuff. So
The only expanded universe stuff that I really did get into, and this is just a tangent, I'm sorry, but like I did enjoy that Galaxy of Terror, and that would have been fun. Like if Disney decides to, like, kids are growing up with the new Disney stuff and they start doing a horror spin-off show, that would be fun. I'm open to. I would check in for like PG-13 scary Star Wars.
well, you're apparently going to do Star Wars what ifs because the Marvel what ifs.
'Cause why not?
Did
Yeah.
well, Marvel did what ifs did so well of. What if we produced a mediocre content
The animation
with
is
a,
a
with,
little-
What if was Star Wars?
yeah. What if we just produced something that wasn't great, but the idea was really good, so people would watch it anyways?
I mean, they get good voice talents.
Well, also,
Not to shit on the animation. I feel bad
They
now.
get Paul Rudd to be Paul Rudd. I know that's incredible.
I'm sure they could do that for Star Wars as well.
Yeah, Harrison Ford will come back to voice Han Solo.
Okay, maybe not. Okay, yeah, I guess if we're skipping around through time, I was thinking for like all the modern Disney stuff, and I know so much of their what ifs would be based off of the Mandalorian universe
I'm
that they've
off
created
that.
on TV.
Their what ifs are going to be what if Vader didn't go to the dark
Yeah.
side.
I was waiting
What if
for your
there was no
concise-
Jar Jar?
Their what ifs are gonna be whatever.
Got him.
It's good. Every single one of them is just going to be what if
Boba Fett.
Darth Vader was a good dad? What if Jango Fett was a good dad? What if Han Solo was a good dad? And then it's just
Wow.
all of the movies not happening.
Yeah.
What if Chewie went home to celebrate Life Day?
We don't talk about that.
That is, I spent so much of my life excited to track down the Christmas special under the guise that like
man.
it couldn't possibly be as bad as everyone said.
Well,
And it's one of the few times in my life where like something has been worse than everyone had told me that it was bad.
It's that hope that you get like a magical bad, you know,
Yeah.
like something that's excitingly bad. And unfortunately, it's bland as fuck.
It's just really boring. It's 2 hours.
There is nothing like campy. I mean, okay, the Boba Fett short is pretty fun. And even that's not that.
I think the singing's almost more fun than that. At least.
Oh,
it's
I mean,
like,
I
you're
love
like,
that-
Why
I
are
love-
we doing a variety show here? Okay.
I love Carrie Fisher putting lyrics to the Star Wars song. Didn't know it had that.
If Disney was to produce a Star Wars Christmas special today,
They
same,
already
I
did.
guess they what?
They did a Lego Christmas special.
Oh, maybe I'll check that out. That's not quite what I'm asking for, but I would love it with like Daisy Ridley and Adam Driver doing any sort of like stage presentation. Like,
Oh yeah, no, I mean, no, I think
I'm into a non-canon Disney Star Wars Christmas special.
Yeah, they
I'll
did
check out
something-
Lego Star Wars
they
Christmas
did something
special
that's
now that I know it exists.
It's like Rey going back in time to like watch other Jedi have to do.
Like
Perfect.
with 3 ghosts.
Yeah, it's fucking nightmare. Christmas Carol.
Yeah. Well, there's some precedent to being visited by ghosts in the Star Wars universe, so I
Yeah.
could see how to connect those things.
I'm the Force
Exactly.
ghost of future past. Yeah.
Go wait. So let's can we go back to Hidden Fortress because I want to talk about.
Well, I would really like to ask both of our hosts what their experience with Star Wars is, and then we can
What are
jump.
your experiences with Star Wars?
Gavin, go ahead.
I too grew up in San Francisco and had parents divorcing around the time that the special editions of Star Wars came out.
I hate to bring it up, but like I just know so many people that had that happen.
Yeah. I had never thought of it that way. I remember connecting specifically with the aesthetics of Star Wars, which I'm sure is a lot of people. The Star Wars, like visually and with the toys reinforcing it, is beautiful. Like when you were in public school, everyone was drawing TIE fighters and X-wings on their notebooks. We had like building blocks because we were like, again, 6 or 7, right? Was the right age. So I was building TIE fighters in class and stuff because I was that age. And I did grow out of it. I struggled a little bit more to stay in tune with them. But I remember
in tune with the Force, you could say.
Yeah. It's the monarchy and Space Ghost stuff. Like I fell more for Space Ghost Coast to Coast, and I'll leave it at that.
I mean, Gavin, you kind of famously don't love magic. Does that extend to the Force and like
Yes,
that world?
I mean,
building?
100%. I think it's where a lot of that comes from. But at the same time, like back then, I was reading like Young Merlin. I was
Hell yeah.
into.
Sorry, I didn't know that you read Young Merlin. We could have we'll talk about that later.
I was deep
After
into
the
Young
podcast.
Merlin, and I read some, like I said, I read some expanded universe stuff. But I was getting into I was getting into science fiction, and Star Wars isn't science fiction. And
It's sci-fi fantasy.
it's sci-fi fantasy, which is not science fiction to me. And I wanted my fantasy and my science fiction separate. Neither the two shall meet. So that was a quick turn for me. But yeah. Sage, what was...
You famously hate it when anything combines and blends genres.
Yeah. Stick to your horrors or your comedies.
Yeah. Can you imagine if they made a horror comedy? You would hate it.
How do you feel about rom-coms?
Sage, what did
Are those comedies with Rom Space Night?
the Star Wars
Because I
Invade
feel
Alaska? Or
Positive. Well, Gavin, like all stories, this one starts in Pastimes VHS rental store, where you could get the fisherman's deal of
didn't see
5
these in
videos for 5 days for
theaters during
$5.
the,
Well, I mean, I got
you-
to see the special editions by
Okay.
the time that comes along, but I've
Oh,
just
you were-
I've such a clear memory of going to this rental store. Must have been like 4 or 5. I would go out on the boat with Dad, so
Sure.
we'd go to these and get all these, mostly PG and G movies. But at one point, he grabbed Star Wars: A New Hope off of it and says, "Have you heard of this?" I don't think he'd ask me if I'd seen it, because how would I have seen a movie and him not be aware of it at 4? Like, under what conditions am I seeing a movie without him being involved? I had never heard of Star Wars.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh well, we should watch it. My dad wasn't too excited about it. He's very much been a Trekkie his entire life, but he
Sure.
appreciates those films.
So
And I would say
I'm in the same boat. My dad's a Trek.
yeah,
My dad's closer to a Trekkie than a Star Wars nerd too.
yeah, they're smarter than us. That's what I would say.
Well,
I don't side on one fandom or the other. I would say that in like when we were in school, there were Star Trek fans and Star Wars fans. I think I had more respect for the Star Trek fans. So I watched the movie, and he asked me what I think, and I go like, I don't know, it's pretty good, kind of fun. But the way he had talked about it, like it was such a big deal to the world, I said, I don't quite get that. And he goes, yeah, me either. There's 2 more of them. Do you want to watch them?
no.
And I did.
What's funny is like my dad, when he brought us to see them, like he was excited for us to see them, not because he was a fan, but also because he'd had that version of like he had moved to San Francisco before they came out. He waited in line and saw them at the Coronet when they were first coming out. And he waited a long time. They played for like a long time in San Francisco, and the line was around the block.
You can still see old like Star Wars fan films that were made in like when the Coronet was still open, and if it's involving anybody going to see Star Wars, it's the Coronet. They're in line at the Coronet.
And it played there for months and months and months, like most of a year, if not more than a year. I don't remember.
Like, I think they when the special edition first came out, I think they were doing like a 3-month release schedule. So it would just be like every 3 months they would put in the next one, and it would just be the same fucking thing. Like you wait in line for hours because we didn't have free ticket ordering or anything like that. And then that was always the thing was you still bought tickets, but you waited.
Yeah, no, and that's like I have memories of when the prequel trilogy was coming out, waiting in line too, which again, like you didn't need to, but it was just, and like not a huge Star Wars
Coronet
fan.
didn't have assigned seating, so that was
this. Well, and this was up when I moved to Sebastopol, but I remember like going and waiting in line just because it was a thing to do in a small town, and there was kids dressed up with lightsabers having battles in the parking lot. When the trailers before the movie were going, a dude like put his foot on the back of my seat and led a chant with a lightsaber. It was some nerdy shit, and I fell asleep immediately every time because I went to midnight screenings, and even back then I was a sleepy boy.
Yeah, Gavin, you fall asleep during so many. For somebody who talks about movies as much as you have, I feel like you've missed like at least a third of the plot of most movies.
If I like them enough, I'll go back and watch them.
He just has to
still
put
haven't
more work
seen
into
the
it.
third prequel, to be honest, but
The good one?
yeah.
Well,
I woke up to a man screaming,
it's all relative, isn't it? Yeah. That's the end of the movie.
Like I said, if Gavin enjoys the first 10 minutes and the last 30 seconds of the movie enough, he'll go back and rewatch it.
Yeah, we're almost there.
He's just got a really good 90-second fan cut of the film.
Oh, you got that Topher Grace one?
So when we moved to Anchorage when I was 7 or 8, all of a sudden, all of my new friends loved Star Wars, and we would have viewing parties. I don't know how many overnights where we would just watch maybe the entire trilogy till like 3 or 4 a.m. And at some point, I really convinced myself to love Star Wars a lot more than I actually did. Like, it's definitely a thing that I did for other people. And it worked. Like, at a certain point, you're not faking it. I love Star Wars. And I don't know what point in elementary school that wore off. I want to make this very clear. I've never been too cool for Star Wars. I know Seamus and I have had conversations that I don't respect Star Wars or I'm not a giant fan. I want to just make it clear now that like there was a point where I truly was. I've just never really given a shit if Han shot first. I understand the arguments, and I do think that's a fucked up thing to change a film that way.
I mean, I give a shit just because they took a cell of his head and just went like he doesn't move. It just moves his head.
Yeah, no, it bothers me that Greedo misses. That's what. If this was
dodges.
done in like a full
Han dodges.
Like they don't even really show that on.
No, see that's the thing about the special editions is it watered down some of the things that like made A New Hope on its own. If you watch A New Hope, not knowing that there's a trilogy coming, it is an actually pretty solid one-off movie. They only added in little details like Darth Vader, flying off into space and then riding his TIE fighter at the last second. Those were little things that were just added after the fact. And so the whole point of Han Solo, and Han Solo originally was not the character that you see. The only reason Han Solo is the character he is because they cast Harrison Ford. Any other actor, it would have been the way it was written. And the way it was written was actually going to be similar to the two peasants in Hidden Fortress.
Okay.
At various times, they're representing R2-D2 and C-3PO, and the concept of the lowest characters in the movie are the ones that we're seeing the movie through. But then when you get to like a lot of the stuff about like the greed, we're only doing this for the money, how can we get out of here with the money? That was supposed to be the Han Solo and Chewbacca arc.
Okay.
But then Han Solo became so likable because Harrison Ford ad-libbed fucking everything.
Yeah.
But the whole point was that this is a guy, what we have established is that Luke Skywalker is a really, really good guy. We've established that Obi-Wan Kenobi is a
I
really,
think you
really
mean
good...
Luke Starkiller.
But then when you first see it, you're supposed to have this moment of, and I mean, obviously I didn't because I grew up on like Indiana Jones and was just like, Harrison Ford, good guy, fuck yeah. But like for many people, that was the first time they'd ever encountered him as an actor. And the first thing you see him do is kill a guy who by shooting him under a table. And then you're supposed to trust him to like guide these people to not be a bad guy. That's a character that in a modern movie is a bad guy, or at least has some kind of heel turn. The fact that Han Solo's closest to a heel turn is just being whiny about money and like being like, we could just go. And then eventually like being like, okay, fuck it, I'm helping.
Just
like,
being kind of mean to a princess.
Yeah. It's because he likes her.
Yeah, sure. It was a long time ago.
This time, unfortunately, I'd seen the, what's that, the Legend of Zelda TV show.
What?
I don't know if you guys have seen these clips from this. There's a Legend of Zelda TV show. Did not last very long and is not well loved.
What?
And
very bad. I'm wondering how you're tying it.
Just the compilations of "Okay, Princess."
Oh yeah, snarky Link.
Couldn't
was
help
this,
but hear
this
that.
is an animated show?
Yes.
Or, okay.
It's worth looking up. Just a compilation of Zelda or Link saying "Princess."
Yeah, so they decided.
For those at home, we're putting in a link, the sound right now of "Okay, Princess."
I can do that.
We'll
Yeah.
loop a few times. There you go.
Yeah.
I'm gonna add so many pew pews.
Excuse me, princess. Excuse me.
Let's take a quick moment and attempt to just really quickly summarize these two movies because we haven't done that yet. I don't want to spend too much time on it. Anybody want to go?
Sure. Hidden Fortress takes place in feudal Japan. There are three neighboring territories. Two of them are warring clans. One of them is neutral, at least. And one of them has just completed a massive assault on one clan is just really overpowered and just completely dismantled the other
The
party.
Yamana and the Azuki.
Yeah, so the Azukis get their ass kicked. They're completely dismantled. And your movie starts with these two peasants that were late to the war. So they were assumed to be on the wrong side of the war. So they were forced to dig graves for people. And then they finally escape from that. And they're walking through the desert trying to figure out a way out of it. And along the way, they get accidentally picked up by slavers, where they re-meet and again try to escape.
Sure
and
did.
Climbing through the mountains, they come across a lone samurai. And they follow him, and they find that he's living at this hidden fortress where he's promising to find there's gold, and they're going to help him if they can help him get back to the Itriku clan.
Really quick, where is the gold?
The gold is hidden in wood.
Yes.
It's hidden in firewood.
Akazuki clan.
The Akazuki clan. So he's like, I need to get back to the Akazuki clan. What he doesn't reveal to them is that he has the princess of the Akazuki clan with him, and he's trying to get her safely there. And the reason he brings on these peasants is that they have a plan to go through the neutral territory that's to the south. And
The enemy territory.
Oh, the enemy territory, and then sneak back up into their original land where they will be safe. And so they come up with this whole scheme where they're going to carry all this firewood. They're going to go do all these things. These two idiots, the whole movie, are trying to run away with the gold, steal the gold, figure out that the princess is
Just generally
the princess.
fuck up everything for everyone.
Yeah.
As often as possible.
And complain a lot while doing so, yeah.
Yes.
Do excellent impressions of a horse trying to drink water.
That was a long bit. Yeah.
Fail to. I mean, the one of their comedic sequences that absolutely works for me, and I'm glad they did as long as they did, is attempting to climb a loose rock, loose soil hill. Just like unbroken 3-minute cut of them just trying to scramble over each other and falling down.
Shit.
Just eating so much
I don't know if
shit.
you've ever tried to climb one of those hills before.
Oh,
It's
yes.
incredible.
No, I felt very seen.
Yeah.
There's so many times mountain hiking and climbing that you just have to go up a scramble like that, and it's that's how I had to get down from Mount Olympus in Greece, and it is the most terrifying thing.
Then let's see what happens. They go into they pick up along the way. They pick up a young girl who was like captured from their clan. They bring her along. They really move past a attempted rape plot for 2 seconds, really quickly.
For the best.
Just never bring
move on.
Yeah,
from that.
for the best move on from that. Then they join a firewood festival where they burn all of their firewood with the gold in it, and then they go back and they pick it all up. But of course, the two fucking idiots decide to go back and try to get the rest of it, which results in them almost getting captured.
And then the duel that we skipped and talked about a while ago, he comes back and he, after they're captured, and is like, yo, I kind of maybe respect you guys, and let's get out of here.
Well, the thing is that the princess
I want to help you escape.
The princess sang.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't sing.
I'm so glad they made her a deaf mute for most of the movie. The in-universe argument is like, no, she speaks to like highbrow and she's a princess. I'm like, that lady is screaming every single one of her lines, and I liked her less than either of our bumbling leads, who are also Everyone in this movie is fucking screaming.
That's just Japanese, dude.
That's great. Do you want to know something really funny about the dialogue?
I've been watching Tokyo Vice, and there's not a lot of screaming.
Well, you want to know something really funny about the whole like, oh, she'll talk to like royally or whatever. So in I think it's Ron, they adapt what is basically like a Shakespearean dialect form of Japanese, and so like even to like native speakers, it's a little like fucking weird.
Is it like Japanese in iambic pentameter? Or
I don't know. It's just like I don't speak Japanese, so I can't really describe it. Okay. But there's this old rumor. I don't know how true it is, but it's apparently that when Emperor Hirohito announced that they were surrendering in World War II, to preserve his honor and integrity, he delivered it in this like Shakespearean theatrical kind of speech, which to most of the commoners that were actually soldiers that were hearing this were like, what the fuck is this dude saying? So they didn't even know they'd surrendered for like a week because he just was so indecipherable.
Huh. Seems like a bad choice then.
Yeah. Well, I mean, choices in World War II, we're not going to get
that's true.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about all the good and bad choices that Japan made in World War II?
An expectation I think people have when they hear Hidden Fortress is based on is what Star Wars is based on, and again, it's based on it. That's it. There's elements, there are scenes
Inspired by, yeah.
It's very, very, very heavily inspired by the tone and the aesthetic. A lot of people think that Star Wars is more of like a space western. It's more of a space samurai, and that's just in general Kurosawa movies. You can see influences, especially in stuff with like The Mandalorian and things like that. You can actually see the influences from stuff like Yojimbo or.
Yeah. Mandalorian's Lone Wolf and Cub, which is not Kurosawa, but still, might as well be. Yeah.
Still samurai genre.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was just watching an interview with Lucas where he was talking about how he's like, yeah, people keep bringing up Hidden Fortress, and like I lifted from it, but like it's not even in my top 5 Kurosawa films.
So that's the other thing I always say.
Definitely not in mine.
Kurosawa might be my favorite director. I kind of go back and forth between a couple people every now and then, but Kurosawa's always been a really like top 3 at least for me. Hidden Fortress isn't in my top 5 at all. It's good. It's good. I guess.
When you're Kurosawa, good is not gonna measure.
Yeah, when
up
you're
to a
up
bunch
against
of your other
Seven
movies.
Samurai, Yojimbo, Sanjiro,
and you have the same star as all of those.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. Toshiro Mifune was actually supposed to be
so good.
He's so
Han Solo?
good. No, he was originally supposed to be Obi-Wan.
Oh shit.
Yeah. You know, it's funny.
He might have understood what the movie was a little bit better than Alec Guinness.
Well, see, here's the thing about Toshiro Mifune is he did multiple movies where he spoke in English. The man did not speak English.
Okay.
I just found out
He learned
did-
all of his lines phonetically.
Oh, he pulled a Casa de mi Padre?
Yeah.
He did a film in Spanish,
What?
and he does not speak Spanish.
Yeah,
And I mean,
he
in
doesn't-
black and white, I guess he could kind of pass for for
can't
Mexican.
I can't remember what it is.
I
but
hate to
there's
say
one-
it, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if fucking Charlton
To a
Heston-
Western
if-
audience of the 60s, absolutely.
if Charlton Heston can, yeah,
Yeah.
Toshiro Mifune can. If John Wayne can beat Genghis Khan.
Well, to be fair, I believe that killed him.
Yes. It actually killed most of a lot of the crew and
Yeah.
cast. They filmed
Whoa.
downwind from the Trinity test site where they were testing.
Oh,
the atom
okay,
bomb.
that's what it was.
And then when
Okay.
they realized they were
That's
downwind
worse. That's
from
so
a
much
nuclear,
worse.
it gets worse. It's when they realized they were downwind from a nuclear test site. They relocated back to L.A., but Howard Hughes wanted to keep up the authenticity of the desert scenes they were filming in, so he brought the sand. He brought all the dirt.
God.
So they built a set using all of the natural
Radioactive.
resources, the radioactive fucking sand. And that's what, led to, I think John Wayne ended up having to get a lung and a half taken out, and he was still fucking chain smoking cigars.
I've flirted with the idea of doing a project history podcast called Shit Show, just covering these incredible fuck ups in film and music history. I'm just not willing to do a behind the bastards level of research for every episode that we do.
It's okay. I mean, how did this get made, Stilly?
That does not. How did this get made? As if 3 Gavins were doing that podcast, okay?
Feels like a slight.
3 very funny people.
How did get this made? One of the 3 very funny people. I'm just saying, one of the people on that podcast will frequently not know that Mortal Kombat was a video game before it was a movie. Shit like that is what I'm saying.
Hey now.
Seamus, would you like to shit on Gavin for a little bit while I'll take a sip of tea?
Yeah,
While
sure. No, I'm actually not going to shit on Gavin. I'm just going to keep the...
when did you first see Hidden Fortress, Sage?
Last week.
Okay. Same.
I've got very little background with Kurosawa. I have watched Seven Samurai. I
Yeah.
think I'm now at the right age and patience level to appreciate Seven Samurai on another level, which isn't even in. That's not even an attack on if Seven Samurai is interesting or boring or can hold my attention. It's the fact that it is black and white, 3.5 hours, and that's still a hard sell for me.
Sure.
But we haven't recorded the episode yet. But we did watch Yojimbo, and I really liked that.
No, Yojimbo rules.
Yeah, Yojimbo fucks.
Yeah. That's the other thing is that, Kurosawa is most known for his samurai movies, but I would say 2 of his best movies are actually not the samurai genre. That's High and Low, which we talked about earlier, and then Ikaru,
Mhm.
which it's an old pencil pusher finds out he has cancer. He's distanced from his family, and so it's just him kind of making peace with his life before he passes, and it's fucking cool.
Yeah, we're still flirting with the idea of doing that versus Living, which is a movie that came out last year. That's a remake of that. It's a movie I liked a lot.
I didn't know that was a remake of it.
Yeah, they don't even advertise all these things. Yojimbo, well, that's a whole separate episode. Yojimbo and its 8 remakes.
And a sequel.
Yeah, which I just found out about that there was a
I'm sorry,
Yojimbo sequel.
A sequel, and then another sequel where he fights the blind samurai.
Yeah, so I grew up, I'd seen Seven Samurai because my dad was a fan of that and The Magnificent Seven, but I hadn't seen this movie I feel like I have a lot of blind spots with Kurosawa as well. Watched some of him in film school and seen a lot of somewhat inferior takes on his stuff.
That's the problem with being influential is there's going to be a lot of people doing what you do who don't have the talents or producers that will let you go wildly over budget to finish your projects.
Well, Kurosawa is also just a really interesting guy. I read his autobiography when I was in high school. It's called something like an autobiography, and a lot of it's very much just he got into filmmaking and all this. But what he really leaned on was that he didn't actually want to be a filmmaker when he was growing up. His older brother did. His older brother was really passionate about film and movie, and he really wanted to be that. And Kurosawa what happened is his brother killed himself his late teens. And so Kurosawa kind of in his brother's memory kind of take on that mantle and say, I'm going to do this for my brother. And then eventually really grew to like have a love and appreciation for it.
Yeah.
But like the reason he did it was he was just trying to, honor his brother. And then
Be closer, yeah.
Yeah.
And then he just kept doing it because that was his way of just like keeping his brother in his life. So I've always thought that was a really sweet thing about him. But I got into Kurosawa probably my freshman year of high school. Previous to that, I had been aware of him. I think I'd seen like Seven Samurai just because it was on TV and my dad knew. But like, make a 10-year-old me sit down and watch a 3.5-hour black. Not gonna happen. But I also had seen like The Magnificent Seven. I had seen A Fistful of Dollars, $3 More. Like I'd seen all these things that are based on Kurosawa's works. And so when I was after my freshman year of high school, I went to this Way summer camp in LA for like the performing arts, and they had a film lab where you could just go and watch movies. And I ended up talking to the guy who was running it, and he's just like, "You ever seen Kurosawa?" And I was like, "I don't think so." And he basically just like the month I was there, like at least 2 days a week, I was just in there just watching Kurosawa movies. And he's the one that got me started was actually Hidden Fortress, because he says, "Well, you're a big Star Wars guy.
Did you know that it was a remake of the Hidden Fortress?"
He didn't say it that way. He just said he was like,
This was a big inspiration.
This is the big inspiration for it. And I was like, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, the first scene is a tall guy and a short guy arguing in the middle of the desert about whose fault it is." Oh, okay, that's Star Wars. Yeah. And I watched it, and like, it's really cool, but it's also very theatrical. That's the thing I've always like. In some cases,
Everyone's eyebrows are working overtime in this movie.
I mean, the princess just standing with her stick.
Yeah.
But the movie, it's cool. It's carried by so much by Mifune's fucking charisma. Like he's the coolest.
Yeah.
And
my biggest problem with the Hidden Fortress is that he doesn't show up for like until minute 30 or 40 or something.
Yeah.
Which, to be fair, I mean, it's not the same problem, because I like R2-D2 and C-3PO. I can follow them a lot more than these two bumbling peasants who were just spending the entire time just annoying the shit out of me. But Luke Starkiller also doesn't show up for like 20, 25 minutes into the movie.
Oh, I mean, that's the thing, is that George Lucas, I mean, I know that a lot of this was changed in the editing, and the editing saved a lot of A New Hope in doing things like the way they edited the trench run, the way that they edited the Tatooine sequences, because originally the Tatooine sequences were going to be cut in with like other things going on, and they were like, no, we should just be here. And so if you watch it, you're on Tatooine for an hour.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I really noticed on this rewatch of Hidden Fortress in preparation for this is, I mean, I know that he's been accused of ripping off other people's music before, but like, dear God, John Williams, like, they're walking around in the early parts of the Hidden Fortress, and I'm hearing these little like, and I'm like, oh, it's the fucking Jawa music. Okay.
Yeah, that actually stuck out the most to me as the influences. Like every Kurosawa film that I've watched so far, like, has had just astounding music. I like the music in Yojimbo as much as Fistful of Dollars, and that's saying something.
Absolutely.
But yeah, just hearing these little riffs and being like, okay.
Like, I think the first 20 minutes of the movie is probably the most that's like, oh yeah, this is pretty like close to Star Wars. These two guys are arguing about how they got stuck there. They just escaped from a battle. They accidentally get sold into slavery. They able to get away.
Yeah.
But then that's kind of where it ends, because the thing is everybody looks at it and they're like, okay, who's the Luke Skywalker? Who's the Han Solo?
There's one-to-ones. There's not really an Obi-Wan.
The closest you actually have, Obi-Wan is Mifune is mostly Obi-Wan.
I mean, it feels like he's all three of them. But
yeah. I think if you're looking that far, then you start looking at like plot beats. Like there is a 1-to-1 fight with the antagonist, with Obi-Wan's old rival, but no one, dies.
He becomes good. He becomes good.
He does become good, which is, that's return
after he gets a big old scar. Yeah.
I'm saying if you're past that point, if you were looking at them side by side from a plot perspective, like, it's not there.
But it is. But also, and then in the design of Darth Vader, think of early on in the movie. It's like Goe or something. The rival.
The rival
yeah.
general?
It's like Hayo. The rival general. He's not as dressed darkly the first time they meet. He's joking. He's jovial. He's like, fuck it, okay. We'll do a duel. I'll be honorable about this. And then the next time you see him, he's all in black. He's in darkness, and he just steps slightly forward, and you see that scar on his face. And I think that a lot of the aesthetic of Darth Vader was taken from that. But like I said, you don't see that in New Hope. You just see the masked, Darth Vader. It's not until Return of the Jedi or Empire Strikes Back, you get a hint that his fucking head's fucked up. Return of the Jedi is the one that you actually see his fucking face.
Yeah. When he does an about face and gets real human for a little bit there.
He wanted to look on him with his own eyes.
Yeah.
Counterpoint for my side-by-side argument. That's a different movie that is not A New Hope.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Fine.
The other argument a lot of people use is like this is a movie about a rebel princess escaping to safety.
Yeah. But also, if we have another Star Wars movie to compare it to. So, a lot of
Phantom Menace.
A lot of the elements that really were like one-to-one with this movie were kind of written out or tweaked as the movie developed, and they edited things, and more characters were developed and things like that. But then when he went back and he's like, I got to go back to the well. I'm doing a new one. I'm going to do a sequel. He went back to Hidden Fortress because let's see. There's the whole thing about having, he sends her sister off to get the double.
Yeah.
They do the double and,
they do the double. That's actually the biggest plot point I noticed.
Yeah, they do the double in Phantom Menace. They also do it in Attack of the Clones too.
Oh, okay.
But then that has a lot more of like, this princess has been driven out of her lands. She's found a protector who's going to come back, and they're going to figure out a way to go back in through the help of some comical fucking guys and retake get to their home country and be able to like save the day. So I think there's a little bit more Hidden Fortress in Phantom Menace there is in New Hope, but in New Hope it really stands out because it doesn't have as many of the like far-reaching like. It doesn't have the pod race. It doesn't have like what was more like there was a Star Wars expectation to Phantom Menace, whereas A New Hope was just him making a movie, and he pulled from a lot of stuff. The opening crawl was written by Brian De Palma, and it just straight lifted from Flash Gordon.
I mean, and I don't know how to even talk about his writing process because like every time I read a little bit more about George Lucas's brain as he's trying to create this. What's funny too is we're coming from American Graffiti, which like isn't maybe the most focused film either, but is extremely grounded in the world that I understand. And we've talked about Me and Fantasy a bit ago, but like trying to listen to him talk about his rewriting and like the way that he's like letting beats go. He's like got this 300 page tome that is the first Star Wars script. And just like the way things change, I don't even know how you can look at Star Wars on the page and make sense of it. So much of it to me that works isn't on the page.
Well, that's the famous Harrison Ford quote. One time he's trying to read this thing. He's supposed to be saying all these like technical jargon about the Millennium Falcon, and he goes, "George, you can write this. No one can say it."
I think a lot of my problems with A New Hope, my few problems with A New Hope, could probably be explained by the fact that maybe George Lucas couldn't explain to his actors what was going on. Also, the fact that I now know Harrison Ford is a giant pothead actually explained. There's some moments in Star Wars where it's very clear that he's high. He doesn't play it off in the way you would expect, but there are like some line readings of delivery. It was like, that actor is high.
Very likely.
I mean, the character might have been high too. Like, let's give him some credit.
I mean, he was a spice smuggler.
Yes, exactly. Alec Guinness, Obi-Wan Kenobi, pretty famously didn't know what the fuck was going on the entire time, and what he did understand, he thought was extremely silly.
Yeah,
he made so much money off this movie.
I'm so happy for him.
And he hated, and it was all. And then for a very long time, it was all he was remembered for, despite having starred in so many classic films.
Yeah,
he hated it.
It is really funny watching, like, looking at the cast list on this and seeing, like, if you're looking somewhere and they have all the photos of the actors in it, and a lot of them have photos that aren't from Star Wars. So you get to see Alec Guinness in, like, a nice, like, Sherlock hat and, like, a nice shirt, and you're like, oh, what a distinguished looking gentleman. and then
Sir Alec
Marv
Guinness.
talking. Yeah, it's
From Lawrence of fucking Arabia.
yeah, it's interesting.
Bridge over the river Kwai.
Yeah.
That's the thing too. Like for me, it's trying to figure out the budget of Star Wars in my head is weird because again, you do have like pretty strong cast in some of it. You have pretty weak cast in others. I think. Wow, how am I forgetting his name? But Luke Skywalker.
Mark Hamill is
Mark
always
Hamill.
been my weak spot of this movie.
Mark
I
Hamill,
think he's good in
Mark
some of the
Hamill-
other Star Wars
Mark
movies. I
Hamill
don't think he's good in
incredible
this.
actor.
Mark Hamill grows into that role.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, he grows into acting.
Exactly.
But I also think there's an advantage of like I think there's a moment where all the cast went and saw this premiere and went, oh,
Oh, I mean,
That's what we
this
were
was
doing.
edited in such a way that they had no fucking idea what they were doing because they'd filmed it out of sequence and all these things, and then they finally watched it and were like, oh, that's what this movie was?
So are you postulating that there is like the original version of this film as shot or at least as intended to shoot is probably a lot closer to Hidden Fortress than what we got?
I think the original script is.
Yeah.
As shot, I don't think so, because, again, they added in a lot more elements. He was pulling from other things. Like,
Yeah.
I think the framework of Hidden Fortress was kind of what started it. The idea of the rebel princess, of being told from the eyes of, like, the two like, least important characters, basically. Then, there's these people who are only helping out for greed versus this noble samurai who just wants to protect the princess, and like there's all these things, and I think you added in the character of Luke Skywalker, and that changes the tone. Han Solo and Chewbacca became fleshed out, and they became their own things, and that further removes from it. If this was just a movie of R2-D2, C-3PO, Obi-Wan, and Princess Leia, oh my god, it's the Kenobi TV show.
A little bit better.
Oh yes, because that was bad.
So there's no music cue when Han Solo swoops in.
No.
At least not in the original version, which I watched like a restoration of the original with a color upgrade. So I don't know if they made any music changes in the special edition. This isn't like a nitpick. It's just like I expected there to be, and in my head I remember there being like I've created a swell of music for Han coming in. It feels like there should be. There was a bunch of things in the rewatch that I'm just like, why do I remember something different? I've got this Mandela effect moment when Obi-Wan Kenobi sacrifices himself, where he turns to Luke and says, "I hope you learn from this." I don't know where the fuck I got that from. That never happens.
It's implied in the look.
Yeah, it's a thing
Run,
that I
fool.
added.
Wait,
yeah.
is that Lord of the Rings? I don't know.
I will also say I understand the idea of sacrificing for time, but the way that it's edited, I would say like maybe it would have been a better choice for him to just fight longer. That would have been a better distraction for time. It doesn't work for me because of the editing.
That and the targeting computer stuff. I mean, again, the Force gets to me, and it never has not. I was able to let it go a little bit easier this time.
Yeah.
I had more fun. I could just shut up and enjoy it because it is a fantasy film and I'm an adult. But like, I remember as a kid that stuff would really bother me. And like the idea that he's like, I mean, it is annoying because you watch the other guy who's using a targeting computer and the computer just misses. Mm-hmm. And so we're led to believe that
it just impacted on the surface.
Yeah. So, I mean,
also the laser curves in the image.
Yeah, which has always bothered me a little bit too. But that's the way those because if you look at the plans, it is supposed to be an arc that somehow winds up going straight down. We're also in space, so I don't know what down means, but whatever. You can't. Again, this is a fantasy.
You're on essentially a lunar surface. I think like down and up have some ability. You're in a space, but you're on something that has its own gravity.
It probably has its own gravitational pull. You get it close enough to the hole, it's just going to get sucked down.
Yeah.
Or just a light tractor. Does that just mean that it like eventually stops moving from? I don't know.
Well, no, it hits the core.
Yeah.
And then again, we found out in Rogue One that this was an intentional design by the designer of the Death Star because he felt bad about having to design. One thing I always like, A New Hope.
The only time that worked in Star Wars where they explained something and it actually made another movie better.
Yeah. No, but the thing about A New Hope that I think stands alone in comparison to any other Star Wars movie is the treatment of the Force. And I always really loved that aspect of it. And I thought that was like one of the things, like I was really like against it with the prequels because I thought it kind of removed a lot of this mystery of it. Where oh my god, okay, Luke is the last hope for the Jedi. He is the new hope.
It's the newest and last hope.
He's but then we find out there is another.
There's another.
There tends to be.
And then now we know there's like a fucking million.
There's a lot of
still
others. Anyone
fucking
could be a
alive.
Jedi.
Like Jesus. But like the idea was,
But they're all from the same family.
Well.
They have to be royalty, and if only special children.
Well, I mean, and then you got that's the thing is that you had expanded universe stuff where it was there are people who have the Force, and Luke would go out and he would find them and say, "Hey, listen, I can train you on that."
Yeah,
and that's how you got the expanded universe and the later Jedi Academies and things like that. But now you have it like Ahsoka Tano lived the whole thing. She was Darth Vader's apprentice, and she lived till fucking. Where the fuck was she during all this?
Yeah.
This is
they
a,
run
this is-
into post like
Cal
Thanos
Kestis
problems.
from fucking Jedi Survivors.
Why didn't Iron Man show up to help? Like it's that same sort of
that
problem.
So, and I always loved is that the Force isn't explained. It's explained, but it's not like
It is felt. You have to search your feelings.
Search your feelings. It's the the
it to be
energy,
true.
and it's the energy of the universe. It's the little things in life and all that. Like it's mystical, and it's because there's a lot of
Honestly,
there's a lot of Eastern mysticism that influences this whole thing.
Yeah,
and I always thought that was really interesting because you don't need to explain it. It's just it's the Force.
They do a kind of literal explanation. Like Obi-Wan says, I wish I had the exact quote. He says it's like an energy. He doesn't say bubble, but he says energy something around every living thing. And I got to be honest, like thinking back about that, that's not that different than being like, well, there's a certain amount of force in your midichlorians or whatever that explanation is.
Yeah,
I think it's because Alec
never brought
Guinness is
up
a
again.
much better actor than whoever.
Yeah,
doing that in the
but
prequel
that's
series.
also just like that's
Then Liam Neeson.
Well, okay, I like me some Liam Neeson, but yeah,
I mean, Alec Guinness is a better actor.
Yeah.
he is.
That's just saying. Oh yeah, one of the greatest actors of all time is a lot better than one of the really good actors of all time.
he is one of the really good actors of all time.
I know we said we weren't going to go too much into the sequel trilogy, but the continued heartbreak for me is there's some moment where I forget there's like some kid who picks up a mop and starts pretending it's a lightsaber in one of the like later movies.
The end of the last year.
And I blinked when I guess he used the Force, and I thought he was just picking it up and using it like a lightsaber. And that's all I want. I want kids you don't have to be special to try and make the universe a little better.
Well, that was also the kind of the thing about the original trilogy. Darth Vader's a fucking badass. Luke Skywalker grows into being a badass. Fucking Obi-Wan is so cool and he's wise. Yoda's wise and cool. But like, who did kids want to be? It was fucking Han Solo.
I want to be Yoda.
They were Boba Fett.
I want to be Yoda. I want to be a wrinkly little swamp rat.
This time,
you get to 900 years
time.
old, this good you look.
Yeah.
I wish I was voiced by Frank Oz every day.
Yeah, I wish I had Frank Oz's hand up my butt every day. Too,
That's
fun.
Beat me to it.
Did you ever hear Jim Henson's response to somebody asking if Bert and Ernie were gay?
No.
He says, well, they don't have genitals. They just have some guy's hands up there.
So, because I know Sage wanted to talk about this. Which version of Star Wars did you watch, Seamus?
It's a thing I forgot to ask you at least 6 times during this podcast.
Upon this rewatch.
The first time I ever saw it, I saw the special edition.
Right, me too.
I have they did a very limited release around like 2007 of the theatrical cuts on DVD.
Yep.
And so what I actually have is, I pulled it off of some fucking LimeWire or some shit, Pirate Bay maybe. Like, God.
I believe they call it Gout. Is it that version, the GOUT?
I don't know. It's an edited version of that DVD.
Okay.
So
was this? I mean, despecialized for lack of a better word, like the original theatrical.
It was literally just the theatrical cut. So like a lot of there's no extra monsters. The cantina looks the same as it did originally. Han Solo shoots first. There's no scene with Jabba, that kind of stuff.
There's no creative choices. There's just
the only things they did was that they leave in some of the effects that are better. So you have that approach of the Death Star with all the X-wings still. Nothing that's like story-wise changing.
Yeah.
The Alderaan explosion looks a little bit better because in the original it just kind of bursts.
Yeah, but it does a weird halo thing.
Yeah, it's an interesting. It's
I like the
sparkler,
original
almost.
Yeah, well, I mean, they literally just set off a sparkler.
I always like the argument when it comes to just the special effects, which obviously don't bother me as much as like the story changes and like the creative changes. But so I watched the People versus George Lucas in preparation for this, and a thing a fan said that really stuck with me is like, the 1977 version's the only one that won an Oscar for best visual effects.
I mean, and that's the thing. So growing up with the special editions, they have like this over sharpened, kind of smooth CG look, especially like when you look at the prequel trilogy that has that to the nth degree. But I think this rewatch may have been one of the few times I've actually sat and watched a non-special version of Star Wars.
Gavin and I watched the same version.
Yeah, I'd like to give credit to the person who did it. It was the D77 version.
Yeah.
And it was their best attempt at a recreation of the 77 theatrical experience.
Yeah, well, scanning it from a laser disc and upscaling. Like I really loved the color scape that they created.
There's also a lot of actual like behind the scenes stuff here. Is that the original cut of Star Wars?
Yeah.
George, like if it does, George Lucas has it under lock.
Yeah.
There's a rumor that it's because his ex-wife edited it so much that it's such a like their baby that he just doesn't like. He was trying to remove his wife's inputs in some places.
Okay.
I don't think he's that petty, but
no, he doesn't seem like it. But I don't know him.
He
seems like a sweet old man.
Huh. Is he a sweet old man, Seamus?
I don't know. I spilled Gavin Newsom's drink on him and ran away.
That's a power move right there.
But really quick, like honestly seeing the non-special version of the special effects, a lot of this movie, I think part of the reason, like you said, it won an Oscar, and what made it the big hit that it was the aesthetics, was the special effects for what they are. There is an organicness to them. There is something very beautiful about how silly a lot of it looks and how beautiful and kind of you can see fantasy in the 70s and 80s. There's a reason that people go back and watch Labyrinth. There's a reason that people go back and watch The Princess Bride. There is this like just organicness to that period of fantasy film that we don't have anymore.
Well, and I want to say, to jump off that, I bring back in Kurosawa to the conversation. Mm-hmm. I think Star Wars is an example, and it's probably the best example we have of a movie that became a blockbuster, that became the biggest movie in the entire world, cultural phenomenon, all of that. And the entire like impetus and heart of this movie is George Lucas's love for cinema and love for filmmaking. There's so many homages and references, and it's just such a love project. And that's what people really take away from it. And there's a lot of fan-made films and things like that. And all of that just comes from a place of absolute just adoration and love. And a lot of that is attributed to the DIY, just fucking make a movie, just do it. And that's kind of what Kurosawa had as well, as a lot of these movies were just like, I want to reference these times because it's kind of like a history people are forgetting about, and I want to capture them. And I don't need a lot of money to do it. And I'm just going to go and we're going to do it. I mean, Yojimbo, we have all of the fucking blood. No, Sanjura is the one with the really exploding one. But they used to just load up condoms with fucking fake blood and then poke them. And they would just create that big fissure that you would see. Like
gets them every time.
Yeah, but that was the thing. Kurosawa was just like, let's just figure out a way to make this and do it. And it all was just done out of like a love of the histories and a love of film, just wanting to make and tell stories. And I think that's what George Lucas was so good at, was telling and creating a story. He created universes. He paces really well, and his world building is top notch. And that's what I think was lost when you went over to the sequel trilogy. It was still focused on, let's make a big movie. Let's make a big product. Let's make the blockbuster.
And he's so focused on the story world, he kind of forgets about the more important things.
And let's make these visuals amazing. Let's focus more on little like visual things, like his lightsaber sparkling, kind of like it's okay. That's cool, but like it just loses this touch. It doesn't feel like you're making a movie that's about the love of the genres that came before. It's not a love of George Lucas as a kid just watching samurai movies and being like, I want to do something like that, and watching Buck Rogers and saying, I want to do something like that. It was somebody watching
Flash Gordon.
It was somebody watching. It was somebody watching A New Hope and going, I think I can do that better.
Well, and much like Indiana Jones, they had a big hand in as well. Like George Lucas is wearing his fandom on his sleeve, like you're saying. And I think these movies, specifically A New Hope, and I know Return of the Jedi got a lot of flack for it, as did the prequel trilogy. But I think these are movies for kids. I think there's a lot of childlike love in these films, and that's part of the, like, I compare it on this rewatch. I was comparing it to Labyrinth more in my brain, because there is, yes, the organicness of the special effects, but there's also just like, we know who's good, we know who's bad. That's not really a concern in this first trilogy.
Yeah. Well, also A New Hope. You know what A New Hope has that it doesn't have an ounce of? Cynicism.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Like, it is a movie for kids because at the end of
It's
it,
a new hopeful.
The bad guy is scary.
Yeah.
The threat is real, but you get these characters.
Yeah.
These characters are likable. They're relatable. You grow with them. You root for them. Sage doesn't like Luke, I know.
I don't either, but it's fine.
I like him in other movies. I specifically don't like Mark Hamill's Luke.
He's a lot better after A New Hope, I will say.
Yes.
To be
I
clear,
also don't.
I love Mark Hamill.
I love Mark Hamill. I love Luke in all three movies. But
any of the
I do
actors in this movie. Even Carrie Fisher's Princess Leia is just like, I don't know. I don't know.
No, I mean, Empire Strikes Back is when everything really hits its fucking stride. And Empire
Because everyone
Strikes Back,
finally got to see Star Wars and they knew what movie they were making.
Basically. And also, it's the one it's dark. It ends on a downer. It ends on a, fuck, wait, we can do this with a big movie like this? And I think
yes,
also,
it ends with Luke dropping to his knees and yelling to the sky, fuck!
But I think that the prequels, they were trying to recapture something, but then it just wasn't there because there was a little too much cynicism. There was a little too much corporateness. It was a little too trying to be glossy because they didn't want to take a risk. And then the sequels went, we're going to try to take a risk, and that risk was a lot of cynicism. And that really brought down what I think is the wholesomeness.
I would argue the sequels have almost no risk, at least in their first and third. But yeah, that's a conversation. I know.
Different conversation. My point is, so it's the original trilogy, if you watch it all the way through, it's the one that you can sit there and you watch it all the way through, and it's a fucking ride. And even though Return of the Jedi, I think, drops the ball a little bit just because it kind of doesn't fulfill the original intentions of how they wanted to tell that story, which is a whole interesting thing. But it is purely just wholesome. It is a feel-good story, and I think at the end of the day, originally Han Solo was supposed to die. Originally, Princess Leia was going to be left to lead the galaxy by herself, and and Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker, is going to have the like Shane moment where he just, isn't able to redeem his father and goes off to hopefully be able to redeem the Jedi on his own, and everybody just kind of goes their separate ways. Instead, we get them all hanging out and being friends, which is why it fucking sucks. We didn't get a single scene of the three of them in the fucking sequel trilogy. Like, how the hell did you do that? But
one of them died.
Yeah, well, we still had one movie where they could have done it.
Oh, yeah, actually, I guess that never could have happened by the design of the films.
Yes. Their original idea was, let's have all three of these characters not be in the same place. But...
yeah.
But anyways, my point is just, I think, it's why I resonated so much with it as a kid, and it still resonates with me today, is that the score makes you feel something.
The score is incredible, yeah.
There's no moment of this movie that isn't iconic, and just like, you'll remember scenes less than you will some other ones, but you're just still like, oh, we're on the Death Star now. This is a whole sequence. The Tatooine stuff, this is a whole sequence. The Yavin stuff.
There wasn't any like scene I didn't like, which is most movies are going to have at least one scene where I'm like, fucking cut this. This is bad.
Yeah, it's a very just like, it's long, but like it doesn't feel that long. It's great for kids.
It's well paced, and it's got a really rewarding, simple, like the character arcs are just simple and rewarding.
Yeah, they don't try to over-explain it. It's just,
no.
This is Luke. He, doesn't want to grow up. He's being forced to grow up.
The Force is an energy thing that lives through things. Don't worry, it's magic. It's space magic.
He's losing everyone who he's ever cared about, and now he has this found family, and they're going to abandon him as well. And, all that, and he's just trying to save the day. He's just trying to do the right thing. He kills millions of people to do it, but has to save the day. Han Solo wants money. He gets money, and then he realizes there's something more important than that. Princess Leia is just a badass.
Yeah,
and Chewbacca's just there.
Chewbacca is there.
He really is. Yeah.
I don't know how you would go about giving Chewbacca an arc, so I'm glad no one's tried.
Or a medal. Yeah, I wouldn't give it to him either.
Or a hug. Just throwing that one out there.
That's right. I know we all threatened to. Did you end up watching The Phantom Menace for this?
I didn't, because I barely had time to watch it.
I'm only disappointed because like you saying that you were going to made me do it, and that was an unpleasant experience.
But after having watched Hidden Fortress, you also see why I said.
Yeah.
A lot more. There's a lot more Hidden Fortress in that than I think there is in it.
I mean,
and also, sorry, really quick. I could see how if George Lucas likes the Hidden Fortress a lot more than I do. I could see how the person who likes those bumbling, annoying sidekicks might create Jar Jar Binks. It might be the same person who has that sense of humor. God, there's so many behind the scenes in like People versus George Lucas were like, Jar Jar Binks is the key. If this works, the entire movie's great. And everyone around him is telling him like, this isn't funny. This is terrible. And he's like, no, Misa loved Jar Jar Binks.
Yeah.
I will say, oh, sorry, Gavin, you were saying something.
No, I'm just gonna say it still gave us pod racing and Darth Maul.
Yep,
Which,
those
like,
sequences,
you know,
And
as
the
silly
greatest-
as
so
Darth
good.
Maul is, he's
And
also
let's
very
also be
funny.
honest, the greatest piece of music in Star Wars.
Oh, Duel of the Fates.
Do, 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 do.
Yeah.
that sequence. So I ended up watching a fan edit of the Phantom Menace, not the Phantom edit, the kind of famous Topher Grace one, I think.
Well, there's one that they turn all the Gungans into speaking in captions.
Oh,
Yep.
I really. So
That's
my
the
perfect version would be a
anti-cheese edit, I
hybrid
found.
of what I watched with that, because that is frustrating. Not just the Gungans, but also kind of the terrible Asian stereotype traitors that like pervade the first 20 or 30 minutes of the movie before they get blown up.
She can't do that.
Or
Truth
also
or something.
Watto. Like Watto
Yep.
maybe never needs to speak in English.
Yep.
Just like, and that makes me feel more like I'm living in a place. I can suspend my disbelief that the different human characters in this world are all speaking English, but there is something that breaks when it's like a person in a costume who's still speaking English.
Well, just because you can speak it doesn't mean you're smart.
But the perfect version of it. So they cut out so much of Jar Jar Binks that it almost becomes a problem. They cut out the entire. There's a great sequence early on where they have to get to the other side of the planet, and they're just like all these fish eating each other.
There's always a bigger
Yep.
fish.
Yeah, that part's great, but the problem with that is like they're stuck in a ship where Jar Jar Binks is doing his comedic minstrel show thing, that they just end up cutting the entire thing, and they're just like immediately on the ship. And you know what? It works. They cut 25 minutes out of a 2-hour film, and like at no point am I confused by what's going on at all. Jar Jar Binks is a tolerable character. He's not good, but they give him so little that like I just, I forget about him, and then he comes back. They do little things that make Jake Lloyd a lot more endearing, which is just like getting rid of the bad choices. That's all it's doing. But towards the end, I don't think they changed anything. And it's not because it's perfect. It's because like everything is timed so well to Duel of the Fates that it's just
You
like
can't
how do you
interrupt
change it?
Yeah, and that's just how good Duel of the Fates.
Yeah. It is I'm gonna say it's the best piece of music that John Williams has written.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't think I can argue with that. I mean, I will always put up the Indiana Jones theme song.
I will too.
It's good. Yeah. It's not like I don't like that. Don't infer that.
No, yeah, I know. I mean,
Sage, famous Indiana Jones hater, and that's why we haven't done an episode on the podcast.
It's weird that we.
it's
I
also-
mean,
that's
I
how-
was
that's-
resistant to doing Star Wars for a long time just because it was hard to find like an interesting take and in on it. So it wasn't until you brought up Hidden Fortress that I like finally, oh no, that is for me the most interesting way to talk about A New Hope.
And I know you feel duped because it wasn't a remake.
Yeah, it's fine.
I mean, honestly, I'm happy it wasn't a remake. I see the influence, I see the tonal similarities and things like that, and I wish we got more things like.
Yeah, if we did have a scene that was R2-D2 and C-3PO just trying to get up a rock hill and sliding down, I would love it. That's my one complaint.
R2D2 trying to go up a hill would be fucking hilarious.
Yes. BB-8 rolling up.
One small tangent just to put it out in the universe. So I guess originally George Lucas was trying to get the rights to make Flash Gordon
Makes
before
sense.
he made this. And it was already owned by Dino De Laurentiis. And there is a Flash Gordon movie. I don't know if y'all have seen it.
Yeah.
Would you say Flash?
With a soundtrack by Queen, who's
He'll save
basically-
every one of us.
That era's John Williams.
So that's a He-Man.
Well, they did also do Princess of the Universe. So like,
But yeah, so that also is there. have been making Star Wars movies, as we've noted. Taika Waititi was trying to do a Flash Gordon movie recently, and I just put it out there. I'd like to see it. That's all.
I would be interested. I mean, I think Sage, you were saying earlier was that you watched Star Wars, you didn't quite like the first time. You were like, I've seen these things somewhere. Like, there's like a lot of stuff that kind of like you have to imagine seeing it in 1970, just unseen. The thing is, it suffers kind of from like people trying to rewatch The Godfather these days. Is that a lot of people watch it and they go, I don't see how like it's not as good to me because these are tropes.
Those people
now.
are crazy.
No,
Although that is how I feel when I try to watch The Sopranos.
But that's what I'm saying is that
And you're crazy. But
Star Wars became such a thing
Breaking Bad.
that a lot of stuff influenced by it, a lot of things reference it, a lot of it like is borrowed.
Yeah,
And, like how
I'd already
people
seen
tell
Star
stories.
Kid, the purest version of Star Wars.
Dude, the kid in that looks exactly like our friend.
Really?
Oh my god. Yeah, 1 for 1.
Is it a baby Ansel Elgort?
Yes. No, it's the kid from Jurassic Park.
Oh man, we got to do a Star Kid episode.
Love Star Kid.
sure.
I might. I don't know. I haven't seen it in 30 years, but I'm sure I've seen it.
He has to
10
pee and
times.
it creates a little hole for him.
Yeah. I just remember an alien getting smashed into a cube in like a auto collision center or whatever.
Fuck, I'm just gonna watch Star Kid.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch Rogue One and then I'll watch Star Kid. All right, are we at the point where we start defining and rating these films?
Let's do it.
Okay. Hidden Fortress. Well, first off, what is our metric for ranking things, Gavin?
Well, we've got
It's
a
3 prongs,
three-tier-
but
Yeah,
sorry.
it's we got 3-tier system. Is it better as a memory? Is it still good, or should we never speak of it again?
Didn't have a bit ready.
I didn't. Or should we find an opening it just slightly smaller than a womp rat and fire torpedoes into it so that it explodes, silencing millions of voices?
Do we put it down the trash chute and see if the monster or the walls get it first?
That's better. Or do we push it into the fires and sing about it in ways that we can turn our enemies to our side?
Or do we make it pretend to be deaf mute for most of its journey?
Or do we trick it into climbing a mountain while we take a sheltered pass to a hidden fortress? These are all bad. These are all terrible.
I think they're all good. I think with the fact that we did 6 of them makes it like one really good one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like
yeah,
one
like
pretty
really
good
great
one.
one.
Sure, we'll take that.
The effort gains.
Anyway, where do you land on Hidden Fortress, Seamus, if you'd like to go first?
So what was it? Better as a memory, still good. Don't talk about it. Basically.
Yeah.
So again, this is because I've always been a big Kurosawa fan, so I've always have thought of what's an easy way to introduce people to Kurosawa, and usually mine is Yojimbo. I think is the easiest movie to be a gateway to him. Seven Samurai. I mean, if you can convince somebody to watch that as their one, they're gonna have a great time. But Yojimbo, I think, is usually the easier, more digestible one. Hidden Fortress is kind of in the middle of those two, where I don't think it's actually one of his films. I think it's fine. I would say it's still good, but it's not a movie that, like, as a big fan of Kurosawa, I've often been, I'm going to go back and rewatch this. So in that aspect, it is a little bit better as a memory, just because it's fine. It's really interesting for the history that comes from it, and it's interesting to watch it back in this perspective. But, like, if you're trying to get into Kurosawa, I'm not going to go watch Hidden. That's gonna.
So that's one better as a memory. Gavin?
No, he said still good.
Oh, you said still good?
I was saying.
Okay,
Borderline still good.
Borderline's still good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I did a Rotten Tomatoes where it sounded like that was a negative review, so that's how I stamped it.
I mean, it has a 96% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, what, like 4 reviews?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, it would have
That's
to be at least 25 or whatever to get
It's
that.
in the Criterion Collection with such highlights.
I mean, isn't every
all of
Kurosawa
his
movie in the
movies
Criterion
are.
Collection that's alongside The Rock? Is that what you're going to say?
I was going to say Armageddon.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The Rock is unimpeachable. It's a perfect film.
I certainly have less bad things to say about that than Armageddon. I have nothing bad to say about The Rock. It is just wild that it's in the Criterion Collection.
Yeah.
That's my gut feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I liked it. I agree with what you said. I haven't seen that many of his films, but the ones I have seen, I liked more than this one. The comedy didn't rub me the wrong way, but it also went on too long in general. And,
Except for them scrambling up the hill.
I'll give it a better as a memory, but it's borderline still good. Like I'm not disagreeing with anything Seamus said.
I thought that was a fucking chore to get through, if I'm being completely honest. I think it's just, I mean, we haven't talked about the actual cinematography in the movie, which is worth taking a minute about, because, like, Hidden Fortress is fucking gorgeous. It was the first of his shot in widescreen, Toho scope, I believe it's called.
Toho scope.
And it's also just got, like, the escape from their prison is it's swelling, or when they get captured in the first place, they're all going through the fog. So this movie was shot during a typhoon. So I'm wondering, like, how many of these weather conditions.
Both of these movies went way over budget due to acts of God, and also, again, George Lucas being not trusted by his crew or cast because they didn't understand what he was doing, aside from it being faster and more intense.
So I'm going to say the cinematography and, like, some of the action beats towards the end where it actually does get really exciting. I love anything with Mifune, but I have to deal with all these characters that I despise. Like, I don't like spending time with almost everyone in the Hidden Fortress except for Mifune. The bumbling sidekicks and just the worst version of the annoying princess trope that I can imagine. The cinematography and some of the action is what keeps it from being a film I'd rather not to talk about. So I put it borderline on that, but still, I respect all the good things it does have going on, and certainly, like, its place and its historical importance. But I'm giving it a rather cruel better as a memory.
Okay. You're borderline never talk of it again.
Also, when I was looking through a bunch of lists of Kurosawa's films for reference, like, it's not on the top 10 on anyone's list.
No. Yeah. What you talking about cinematography, I did want to mention real quick. Like, I mean, again, the ILM being created for Star Wars and knocking out of the park on all that stuff, because Fox had just shut down their own visual effects company. But he tried to get the DP from 2001: A Space Odyssey to shoot it. The guy said yes and then backed out. And
probably hates sand.
I do think it's funny.
Too coarse.
He actually got the guy who shot A Hard Day's Night,
Hell
and
yeah,
Doctor Strangelove, and The Omen to shoot it.
Hidden Fortress?
No, Star Wars.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
No, we're on to A New Hope now.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
We were mentioning cinematography. I thought it was very funny that, like, the guy who shot Star Wars shot A Hard Day's Night. I think that's pretty wild.
Hard Day's Night's a great movie.
Yeah. That was the one that Lucas said specifically was he really liked Doctor Strangelove and A Hard Day's Night.
Interesting.
Those are what got him the job.
They
apparently really did not like working together, and but all that.
Seamus, A New Hope still good?
Still good. Yeah, Jesus Christ. Come on.
I thought about just skipping this section. I wasn't sure how everyone was going to feel about Hidden Fortress. Gavin, New Hope still good?
I would say still good. I enjoyed it a lot more on this rewatch than I think the last time I watched it.
Absolutely. I think the restoration helps a lot with that.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, like, as silly as it was, we didn't blow past it, but I didn't comment on it. Yeah, Han shooting first, way stronger scene.
Yeah, especially because, like, it's pretty clear that Greedo's about to shoot him anyway.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, just a small little moment at the beginning of the movie, and Luke Skywalker standing up with binary suns, the two suns in the background.
Yep.
Playing.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Fucking one of the greatest shots in history of fucking.
It's pretty good. Yeah.
Still good, even.
Yes, I would call it still. So, yeah, people have always thought I've not been a Star Wars fan. How I always explain it is, like, I don't get Star Wars the way that Seamus clearly gets Star Wars, the way that so many people in my life get Star Wars. It's pretty good. I put it in a long category of films that I'm like, yes, I think this is good, and I don't understand why you're so obsessed about it.
And I've just not been a Star Wars fan, and I just softened on it this time, I feel like. Like,
I'll put it alongside The Shining. The Shining's a movie that I think is pretty good, and I don't understand why everyone's on its nuts the way it is. But I'd still call The Shining still good.
Yeah.
there's still, I had more ready. There's a lot of these 80s movies that are just, I don't understand why everyone like heralds Ghostbusters as like a level above what I think it is.
I think
also
some
still
of these
good.
you're listing are just imperfect films that have enough going for them that they're kind of magic. Like I don't think Ghostbusters or
Shining.
The Shining are perfect films, but when they are,
I mean, I know
hitting,
people who will fight you over The Shining.
that's fine.
Yeah, and that's weird to me.
when they're hitting though, like they're hitting really. I mean, dude, Scatman Crothers in that movie is, he's doing a great job. But like, what is that story beat at that point?
Yeah.
Like,
Also, the thing about The Shining,
again, that's
I don't think it's so much.
stuff,
It's
so.
not. The Shining is one of those movies that it's like as much of it is a love of The Shining. It's also Kubrick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I think that's like he's honestly like he kind of lets the Shining part of it go away because it's not that interesting. The rest of the movie's better than the Shining part of the Shining.
Yeah, if you ever want to see what the Shining part of the movie would look like, look up the TV version that was
I
directed
would rather not.
based more on the book that Stephen King didn't hate.
Yep.
Not nearly as interesting.
And instead of that, you should go watch Maximum Overdrive, where where he takes his stories into his own hands and finally directs his own movie.
That's the one where
You should go watch Dr. Sleep because it's really good.
Dr. Sleep is really good. Wait, is Maximum Overdrive the one where like a little league team gets killed by a soda machine?
Yes.
Yeah, hell yeah.
But yeah, these movies are still good. Is there anything else we're doing on this podcast? We pitching a.
I think we're over.
Well, this has been our Hidden Fortress episode.
Yeah.
One of our Akira Kurosawa trilogy of episodes on this podcast. So
Yeah. Stay tuned for more if you like that, or it'll be, if you didn't, it'll be better.
Well, I would say
Why not?
also, I mean, this is the thing about Hidden Fortress is it's an easy introduction to Kurosawa, but it doesn't have that much meat to it. It's not one of his better ones. It's fine, it's good, but like you guys are doing what, Yojimbo and Seven Samurai?
yeah,
Yeah, you're going to talk about those a lot more than you're going to talk about the movie that it influenced, which is a cultural phenomenon and bigger things in history. Hidden Fortress is
Fair.
a pretty cool movie that has some groundwork and framing devices that are made a much more popular movie.
we didn't even mention. The
It's a kind of cool movie
transitions.
that George Lucas liked.
Basically.
Star Wipe, Diamond Wipe.
Oh yeah, we didn't talk about that weird editing. I think also like watching Hidden Fortress right before Star Wars, I'd always hated that editing pattern, and now that I've watched a couple Kurosawa films, I'm like, all right, whatever. It's still annoying when it's happening in like the prequels and even the sequels still do it. I'm like, I don't love it. I don't love that shit that I learned on iMovie is being used on the biggest movies in the world.
iMovie learned it from Akira Kurosawa.
Okay.
So
Yeah. Just like the Ken
Seamus,
Burns effect button.
you got anything you want to plug?
Currently, I produce a podcast for the Daily Beast called The New Abnormal. We release an episode every Tuesday, Friday, and Sunday. It's hosted by Andy Levy and Daniel Moody, with production by me and Jesse Cannon. We talk about politics. It's taken years off my life, but it's a good time. We try to make it a little bit more accessible. And before anyone asks, we don't both sides of this shit. It is leftist as fuck.
Right on.
Gavin, where can you find us on the internet?
If you Google "Still Good Pod," we're probably like the third or fourth thing to pop up, right?
You put in "Still Good Pod" and then put in a couple other words, like
you
any of
might
our
find
names or podcasts or something.
You could almost just say that you just described your SEO as, "Is this still good?"
If you're listening to this, you're already halfway there.
Yeah. I mean, I can't criticize you. I can't mock you guys about the name in any way. I ran a sketch show for 5 years called The Worst. Like,
so we all understand marketing here.
oh yeah.
We're on Instagram at Still Good Pod. You can write in if you've got any questions, requests, or want to yell at me about Star Wars. I'm always down for that. Stillgoodpod@gmail.com.
Open to pitches too. Like if someone thinks they've got a good idea for being on the podcast.
Yeah, if you think you're
we
better
haven't
than
put it
me.
out there, but it's out there now. Yeah. Thank you again, Seamus. Sage, do you have any pitches or are you good?
No, we're done.
Cool. Until next time.